Appreciate you coming out. I'm here to discuss the events that transpired this morning on Clark Street. This is a call that we received this morning at 5:53 in the morning. This call was dispatched as a home invasion that had just occurred. Detectives arrived on the scene, began placing some investigative efforts towards determining what exactly happened. This did not look from the beginning as if it was a home invasion robbery. In my comments this morning, was working on information that may not have been the case. Throughout the day, we've learned that indeed was not the case. This was not a home invasion robbery. Living at this location on Clark Street was Miriam Blake, a 26-year-old female. She lived there with her two kids. One of her children was a 3-year-old female who was actually in the house. She had an acquaintance named Enrique Pajaro. He's a 19-year-old Hispanic male. The two of them, over the last day or so, decided that they were going to rob a drug dealer who they were acquainted with. They met, decided the plan for the robbery, acquired the tools for the robbery, then sought the victim, Robert Scott Jr., black male 32, out to come over and deliver them drugs, both crack cocaine and marijuana. When the victim, Mr. Scott, arrived at the house, they met him. Everything was social. They actually smoked some cocaine with the victim at the house. The victim fell asleep in the victim's bedroom. The plan that both Blake and Pajaro had planned was put into action. The two of them went to the bedroom, actually woke the victim Scott up by beating him, first using their hands, beating the victim. That was not successful at first as the victim began to fight back and struggle with them. They decided then the second part of their plan was to use a sledgehammer, what they had acquired before the victim came over, and began to beat the victim about the body with that. Both suspects participated in the beating, not only with the fist, but also the beating with the sledgehammer. The beating with the sledgehammer was not successful either. They then resorted to the suspect Pajaro strangling the victim, where he was deceased and died from the injuries there. When they realized what had happened, they had initially decided that they were going to take the victim from the house and leave him outside the residence by a stop sign to be found at some other date and time. They decided that that was not the case today, that what they would do would come up with the story of the fake home invasion robbery. They called 911. Suspect Blake got on the phone, reported the 911 call that the home invasion had just occurred. During this robbery, I said that the victim had, or excuse me, the suspect had two children that lived with her. Her 3-year-old was home and present during all these events and actually witnessed some of the events transpire, them beating the victim. They've both been arrested this afternoon and charged with Mr. Scott's murder. I can answer a few questions if anybody has any.
What made it clear to you at the beginning that things weren't the way it seemed as far as their story was concerned?
It wasn't so clear at the beginning. The stories between the parties that were involved that they first gave us didn't add up. Some of the evidence at the scene from even the get-go, from the onset, it just didn't look as if it was a home invasion, and we started working from there. These are all fluid cases, and I spoke this morning about how fluid that was, and it's a classic example of it's not always what it appears to be, and it's not always clear-cut. It took some investigating to figure out what went on. Some interviews went on, and both subjects actually admitted their involvement with this.
Any other questions?
Where was the other child?
The other child had been taken by his father, so he was not in the residence at the time.
Where are the kids now?
The kids have been released to family members.
I was going to ask.
Any other questions?
Actually, are we concerned with any other drug dealers involved or any other people involved?
It appears that the parties are involved were the two that we've arrested today for the murder. This was a pre-planned event. The two that pre-planned it, we've taken them into custody, so we don't feel like there's any other parties involved or anybody else outstanding.
And Chief, this was the victim's house?
No, this was the suspect. This is where Miriam Blake lived. He had come over several times in the past where she had bought drugs from him, and again, that was part of their plan.
All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir?
Thank you.